what needs to empower them, or what knowledge do they need to have, or what resources do they need to have that gives them the autonomy and the confidence to listen to their students and do what they know is right.
Always in education since I've been in it, we've had contradictory policies. We have to do this and we have to do this, and they don't even go together.
Right.
It's always been kind of crazy, but you can ignore some of it.
Yeah, but that's harder and harder.
In.
Even if I think about a math program when I first started teaching versus the ones today, it was very turn the page-ish. The teacher was expected to do the work that goes along with it. It wasn't like, here's your 70-minute block all laid out for you. It was, here's the concept and here's some problem, and then you figure out the rest. And now it's, we don't think you can do anything. You don't know anything. So here's it laid out every minute by minute by minute. 3 minutes on this, 5 minutes on this, 20 minutes on this. Then there's no minutes to do anything that you think is right. With the old program, you had some teacher autonomy to do what you knew was okay with kids.
Like, what if it is adopted and it's mandated, but I don't do it? What would happen to me?
I think it sometimes depends on your administrator. Some of the schools I work at, the administrators, they talk about using with fidelity, and sometimes they talk about using with integrity. And if it's with integrity, then I have to take in the account of my students and not just turn the page, just do the program.
Like I said, I tried to find a way of doing the Sullivan reading and the Sullivan math when I had to do it, but by minimizing it. I never would do full-time. I never would from day one.
Enough to get by.
I always thought of it as keeping the person who has to turn in to the office whatever they had to report.
What they have to say.
To give them,
I was talking with this one third grade teacher. She has to do it every day. It has these stations. They're not great at all. But you could have one out at your stations and say, yep, we do it every day. Here it is. It's always right here.
Do the rest.
And the rest is good stuff. The kids will probably never go to that station because it's boring. It doesn't ask them to think.
There are ways around it, but I wonder if there really still are. I know that I would still, in spite of being scared and all that and shy in those days, I would have to be in trouble.
What do teachers need to know in order for them to flip the switch and get rid of that mindset that something bad's going to happen to them? What needs to empower them, or what knowledge do they need to have, or what resources do they need to have that gives them the autonomy and the confidence to listen to their students and do what they know is right?
There's no sense of responsibility. The responsibility is to do what the school says, and we've lost academic freedom, we've lost autonomy. So how do we change that is what your question is.
I think part of it is having enough experiences and learning yourself as a teacher, whether it's professional development or whatever it is, that you feel so confident and so sure about what you're doing is right for kids that you can't do anything else.
Right, exactly.
You can give me that, okay, I'll fit it in, but I can't not do what I know is right. Once I know for sure, so much so that you can't convince me otherwise.
And sometimes I've heard people say when I've gone into a district, it says, I knew this was right. I just needed to be reminded that it really was. Because you do lose your ground and you think, if everybody else in the world is telling me to do this, why are my kids not being able to do it? Why? I must be bad. Sometimes you do need just some support. There also is the reality of, like if a teacher isn't developmentally at the level in terms of feeling like they can have opinion until they're there, they sometimes can't just go in and do the right thing in spite of what the district says.
I think too, what some teachers are missing is the opportunity to go into a classroom where those good things are happening and to see what it looks like when kids are engaged and not just being compliant. When you see, like, there aren't behavior problems. Yes, there are some smaller behavior, but overall, the kids are engaged and they're busy doing the work that they need to be doing because it's meaningful, enjoyable, they're learning something from it, and it's at their level. It's challenging, but possible when it's set up so every kid has access at their level. That's engagement versus walking into a classroom where everybody's sitting like this, waiting for the teacher to tell them when to move their cubes, and that's different. But if you haven't had the chance to see that happening, then you don't know possible.
There's a certain level of common sense that we've lost. There's no belief that I know you haven't had this research study or that, or this is this policy or whatever. It's people know a lot more than they act on as teachers, just because they would treat their child differently.
Yes.
They would know common sense about some things, but they don't think they're allowed to think or use common sense.
I believe that there's good educators. I think there's good principals. I think there's good teachers. I think that we are losing good teachers.
Yeah.
And let's face it, when you're it's your first year of doing anything, you're not as confident, you don't have experience.
Right.
And when you have a bunch of brand new teachers, they don't have the strength to know how to stand up. The older teachers that have been around for a long time and were good teachers, they just got tired and they've left.
So what can the average teacher do now that it's changed, now that there's
Yeah.
so many forces against the average teacher, since it was easier back in the day just
Yeah.
to talk to your principal, what does the average teacher do now?
I think the average teacher has to be willing to keep learning, watching their children, learning from their kids, and trying out things and be willing to say, this doesn't work. What can I do to help my kid? And even when you don't know, talk to people who do know. I guess it's kind of keep fighting for your kids. The more you learn, the more you know, and the more, if you know the right things, you can't not do that.
Yeah.
No matter what they tell you. One year that I was in the classroom, we did have a program. Most of the time I didn't have to use it, but my principal said I need to see the lesson. I was like, okay. And then I wrote up the whole thing about what I did differently than the lesson itself. I said, here's the basic lesson. I did it, but here's what I did differently. And it was basically, what the directions were, have 2 baskets, and then have the kids write that you have 5 apples in this basket and 0 apples in this basket. Write it down. Then let's move 1 apple over here. And now what do we have? 4 apples in this basket, 1 apple in this basket, and then on and on. But it's all teacher directed. So I explained to the principal that I want all my kids to have apples and baskets, which would be just some cubes, and find all the ways that they could put apples in 2 different baskets. So they're all working on their trying different ways. Then when you come back together, we can chart the different ways, and we have a different way that you don't see up here yet. And they got to the same thing, but the kids were engaged. They were doing the work instead of me doing the work and them copying.
Right, and there's no way for them to think about what's happening or.
And there's this idea that if I'm telling you and you do it, then you're going to learn it. Instead of you doing it, you learn it. I had a principal who was like, oh, that's way better. Most principals are reasonable. And if you said, when you come in, you're watching this lesson or whatever, this is the part I'm not doing because it doesn't make sense, and here's what I'm doing instead. Just seeing that engagement.
And also the conviction of like, this does not make sense, I'm doing it this way.
Yes.
Let me show you.